I would hope that folks are reading some of the wonderful things, certainly that Steve posts in Slack, Jerry posts in Slack, and that you're reading those, because those are opportunities during the week to get you percolating about world conditions, to comment on them, and then maybe find some fuel to be able to go and have discussions. And there are some interesting things going on in our world these days that are permeating people's thinking and people's decision making, and that's coming into the church. So last week we saw that the United Methodists are basically having a schism. They're having a schism because a large part of that particular denomination believes not only that homosexuality and the LGBTQ plus movement is fine, they also think that it's fine to have clergy that are practicing in that orientation and that are leaders of a church. So I would hope that that kind of thing, knowing that that exists, creates a kind of anxiety for you that makes you want to talk about that, because that makes no sense. That's why one of the articles this week was the LGTB hymnal, if you saw reference to that. So there's an LGBTQ plus hymnal that honors the fact that Jesus thinks you're great if you're queer. Hopefully that kind of stuff, if it doesn't allow you to percolate, it helps you to be thinking, to even ask questions and say, I don't know where I come in on this. And here's why I say this. Michaela's at a certain age, Christian's at a certain age, and maybe even Nate's at the age, but maybe in the wrong environment, where right now, this is a discussion in our churches. Our young people don't know where to come in on this, because every show that they watch, every commercial they watch, every show that they listen to has elements of this in it. And our kids, even if quietly, perhaps, if they're not vocally saying it to you, our kids are going, well, maybe your parents are not so, maybe your parents are too dogmatic. Maybe your parents are just too prejudiced and too bigoted, and they've gotten it wrong. Those are the kind of things that hopefully in your head are creating a kind of desire to discuss, desire to have exchanges, to be able to say, when you've got a Christian who's about to graduate, there's a whole lot of folks in his school right now that have been given permission to be, because they feel weird, there's a whole now category to put themselves into that says that they're basically going to be opposite and opposition to Jesus' teaching. And I would hope that when we think about that imposition, that really makes it a little challenging to go to sleep at night if you're not pushing back on it. That's in your school system. And that's in your school system as early as kindergarten. Now, it's in your churches. And dollars to donuts, a lot of our young people are perhaps beginning to think it's not so bad. So that's where the articles come in. That's where the exchanges come in, so that you're having some community discussions with people who claim to be like-minded, and then that may encourage you to be able to go out and find those exchanges that create Jesus encounters.
I have a question for you, sir.
Sure.
Yes, I have been given to understand, and maybe I'm misinformed, that this mentality is the result of about a 2% of the population.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, how can 2% of the population create such a pervasiveness of this mentality? You mentioned the
And the loudest one speaking.
Yep, that allowed 98%.
So I'm just concerned that maybe there are some folks that are not of that orientation, but say, I'm okay with that and I'll endorse that kind of thing, particularly if they happen to be in Hollywood or media there, and then all of a sudden it becomes even more pervasive. You talked about your HGTV commercial. I saw something the other day where it was another gay couple that was rejoicing over a puppy or something. And it's like, okay, fine. It's just, it does seem to be way in our face for just 2% of the population.
It's because it's no longer just 2% of the population. And it's because of the strategy that they've used. And it's an intentional strategy.
Yeah.
They have influence in media. They have influence on social media. They have influence in schools. You have a lot of teachers who are teaching kids that this is okay. And so if you look, there was a breakdown that came out maybe it's a week or two ago, but it was showing people who identify as LGBT, whatever, alphabet people by age group. And as you look, the older people, very low percentages. But as you're getting towards younger and you get to Generation Z, it's as high as 40%.
Right.
And it's because and really, I don't think it has anything to do with, I think it's, in a way, I hate to say it this way because it sounds kind of flippant, but it's almost a fad.
Yes.
Because as Preston has said, as you take people who feel like they don't identify well with others, they don't fit in, they don't feel like they're part of a group, and then all of a sudden, if you say, I identify as this, whatever it is, then all of a sudden you're sort of lifted up and you're made to feel special. You're given a pedestal. And it's that sort of feeds into that desire to identify that.
But even people who are like gone, they're all a different kind of
Yes.
just wildly different people.
Yes. And Steve brought in, remember the video last week, talked about the fervor. And in fact, that's kind of what I'm on this morning is the fervor, the enthusiasm. That's what he talked about last week, is the fervor to have a similar kind of change the world desire that this 2 to 5% originally did. Because we don't, right? And Steve's right on this. In fact, one of the things that was my theme this week, my wife and other folks had to hear it this week, is there's a party that we know, and if some of you folks remember, someone from our history, and this week was a special week for folks in the alphabet community. But this month is supposedly, it's a good whole month of celebration. So this individual that we all have a history with used their platform on Facebook to say that they're part of this community now. And in an encounter Monday night, a few of us got to meet this person, and I didn't know that they had made this proclamation. What I did remember is that from knowing them, and I've known them for probably almost 20 years now, that there's been a lot of confusion in terms of friendships, intimacy, boyfriend, girlfriend kind of stuff, a lot of confusion. And one of the comments that I made in a discussion, and this is kind of one of my Jesus encounters in one of the saloons this week, but is we were talking about the Jesus movement earlier today. And some of you are old enough, perhaps, if not to have experienced this, at least you know this from a church history standpoint. There was a time when Christianity attracted all the weirdos. There was a time when Christianity attracted the weirdos. And so the folks who were kind of goth at one time, the folks who were kind of hippies, all eventually became a lot of the linchpins of some, in many ways, I would say, of our modern giants of theology today. Billy Graham was born in a different time, so he was pre-hippie, but a lot of the guys, Calvary Chapel, a lot of those guys came from the 60s and then have been movers and shakers in the 80s, 90s, and today. And they came out of being hippies. They came out of the age of free love. They came out of Woodstock. And ultimately, as they got older, those misfits and those weirdos and those we don't belongs, Christianity was attracted to them because Jesus loved the outlier. He loved the outlier. And so Christians attracted those folks until Christianity got to be kind of too exclusive and very impotent and not welcoming of all folks. And so if you remember when a lot of us were a lot younger, there was only the LG. It wasn't even a movement. There was only L or G. And then they added a T. And then, kind of the way that Steve is suggesting, if you want more people in the club, you allow more opportunities for everybody to join. And so not only does the Q get you there, but the plus gets you there. So if you're a goth, if you're a fringe, if you just feel weird because people make fun of you in the locker room, you can identify with somebody in that group. And that group will not only embrace you, but it makes you feel special to be a part of that group. And feeling special, folks, part of the reason that we linger on that is that's when you start to idolize yourself.
Mhm.
And your own agenda becomes more important than what Jesus' agenda is. And that's one of the problem with the LGBTQ stuff is not the physical stuff that happens, because I'm going to make some reference to that in a couple seconds. The problem with that is it elevates the people involved above Jesus and Jesus' mission. That's the problem. Thank you for that, Steve. And that's a great question. That's a question we have to keep reminding ourselves of, because the issue with this group is not that the physical stuff that they engage in is any more heinous than Nick Cannon. Okay? Nick Cannon is the young man who hosts The Masked Singer. And he brags that monogamy is not the way to go. So not only is he no longer married to Mariah Carey, but he believes that having children that he fathers and perhaps financially takes care of by a variety of different women is perfectly okay. Yes, sir.
Just announced this week, he's got more.
He's got more on the way. Right. That's where our society is. And that is just as not God honoring as the LGBTQXRXPLW stuff.
And so he would be able to actually say, well, I'm just being like the Old Testament guys.
Well, if he was going to stand on the principles of the Bible, but he doesn't have multiple wives.
Oh,
Right. Right. He doesn't have multiple wives.
okay.
Yeah, because that's the Islamic practice in the fundamentalist sect, is that they still do that. So he doesn't have multiple wives, he just has multiple partners. He has multiple baby mamas.
Baby mama.
Right. And baby mamas is a label that we are very, very, very much okay with in our community today.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that kind of leads me to this point in the sermon. I don't think I posted this on Slack, but it bothered me when I encountered it this week. It was a pastor who was preaching very energetically to his congregation. He was preaching on some of this LGBTQ plus stuff, and in it, he really harped on the fact that homosexuality is the most heinous of all sins. That homosexuality and the like is the most heinous of all sins. And I read this, and I just shook my head. Yes, sir.
That's okay. His perspective, not necessarily God's perspective. I'm thinking God's perspective is rejection of him, rejection of his son. It just from his perspective, he made, and excuse the graphicness, but he may just visualize some of this stuff, and that makes it heinous in his mind.
Okay, so why is he not visualizing the people that are part of his congregation that are heterosexual, that are probably cohabitating or engaged in flagrante delicti?
We don't need to go there.
Pardon me?
We don't need to go there to that reason.
Yeah, because we'd have to admonish a whole lot of folks that are a part of our congregation.
Yeah, no, and I'm not saying. I'm just saying that that's his perspective. I think that God has a completely different perspective as far as what is the most heinous. That's a pretty absolute statement. But I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying, I mean, there are lots of other things that are just as bad, in my opinion. But that's just my opinion. I think God sees the rejection of him and his son probably as paramount, and that's what gets him in hell, quite frankly.
Then you get into the sin of the sin thing.
Okay. Uh-huh. But not us.
No, I agree with that.
Not us.
I try to listen to the thing, but that's not, it's very difficult for us to handle it.
It is, and your honesty about that is what sometimes Christians don't want to admit.
Mm-hmm.
Is that Gene, although he's absolutely 110, which is not really possible, 110% correct. That's the Sunday school answer. And here's why it's the Sunday school answer. The ultimate heinous sin is the rejection of Jesus. But that's not how we feel. We don't feel that way. We feel like things that violate my sense of morality, my sense of decency, are the things that should be castigated the most. So I would tell you, if we went back 150 years or so, homosexuality would not be what preachers would be preaching. They would be preaching purity. 150 years ago. And certainly railing about murder. it wouldn't be the same issue that's the current, the current event of today. And most people don't think that rejection of Jesus is all that big a deal.
Yeah, the other thing is that may be what he says now. And I don't mean this in the way of it may sound, but he may change his attitude if he found out that his daughter had been raped. And all of a sudden that makes all of a sudden be the new most heinous thing.
Sure.
And
Yep.
so basically he is probably grading
Yes.
based upon the pervasiveness of today.
Yes. And my bigger point is not so much picking at Gene for saying it's a Sunday school answer, because he's absolutely right. My bigger point is sometimes because we tell you from a leadership position, that's what you walk away believing.
Mhm.
That's my head shaking moment. Because you may not take the time to really read and comprehend the contents, and then to discuss them so you understand them and your ability to assimilate and make them a part of you. You walk out thinking that the things that you heard in the topical or the expository sermon, because the guy is a really powerful and great preacher, is the truth. And this is why you have to be, and let me go Bible term on you. You have to be Berean-like.
Yeah.
You have to trust and give Brother Gene and myself and Brother Pastor Bruce, you have to give us the benefit of the doubt. But then by all means, please go back and read and find that what we're saying is trustable. Because just because we say it, it may be that may be my particular soapbox that day, and I'm standing on it. So you need to see, am I standing on the principle that Jesus says we should live or die on?
Amen.
I'm waiting for you to say something crazy one day, just like throw it in there and not say a word, see if anybody.
Every now and then I do.
Crazy.
Every now and then I do. And unfortunately, I have good checks and balances who will go, you're an idiot.
Then we look at you like,
Well, and he does that for the rise. He wants to get you your ire up, because he finds that fun.
I do find it fun, but I also find it fun because if people can remember a fun discussion, then they can get back to the source of why the discussion started.
Yeah, pressed as a knucklehead.
Yes. Yeah, I'll take responsibility there. Because one of the things that I've heard and I've learned, surprisingly, over the past 2-3 years is this. It's very difficult to get church people having honest discussions about the Bible.
And that's the truth.
It's very difficult.
When they're done, church people, when they're done, they leave.
Yes.
And they start talking about how everybody's friends and medical problems.
no, and they start tempted to tell what they think, and sometimes they don't want people to necessarily know what they really think about something
Mhm.
They just
because they have. Well, yeah, because it's been known to happen. You got persona A, you got persona B, and persona C, and depending on what group you're in, that's what you project.
Oh my. That's
Just,
and I'm with you. That's the audience analysis that I talk about.
That's right. And so that's why we do have the encounters that we have, and why I do pitch questions that are grenade-like sometimes, because I do enjoy it. But if it allows us to have discourses that become more honest, then it's going to help you during the course of the week have an honest, at least an honest address toward your Savior or toward him not being your Savior, and then being able to be involved in discussion outside of the holy people in the holy building.
Friday night, I took Michaela to her youth gathering at my mom's church, and ended up talking to one of the elders in the church there, who is originally from the Philippines, just to give you a picture. And I asked him whether or not his daughter had shared with him any of the discussions that we've had with regard to the youth talking. And he's in a struggle right now because his daughter is the discussions going on in the youth group, and she is actually thinking, well, maybe that's not so bad after all,
Sure.
kind of thing. And so, and to me, that's a way of saying not worth fighting is what it comes down to, because it is so pervasive. It's kind of a David and Goliath sort of thing. You feel like you don't have enough voice that's going to make any difference because it is so much out there. But anyway, it's affecting other families and godly families. Joel is a good godly man. I love him dearly. He invited me to speak over their church a couple of times. So the point is, his daughter is coming home from the youth group and from school and going, you know what, maybe this isn't so bad. And so it is going on.
Well, we look at it sometimes too, where it doesn't affect us. So look at it 20 years ago, right?
Right,
Where we're like,
right.
okay, it didn't really affect us. So we kind of pushed it aside,
Mhm.
right? Kind of shoved it away, said, doesn't really affect us. Whatever goes on in your house, just keep it in your house,
Correct.
right? Don't shove it in my face. But now that it's on almost every show you watch anymore, it's in the news, it's everywhere you go. We almost don't know how to react to it because we've always just pushed it aside. We don't always know how to now pivot
Mhm.
and change the way that we were thinking. So 10 years ago, we're like, yeah, okay, that's over there. That doesn't impact us. Now that it does,
Mhm.
you now have to kind of think about it and then figure out how you're going to react. And it's a challenge.
It is, and you're going to be unpopular because if we're honest, today's believer community, today's church community, today's church attendee community has bought into the idea that of free love.
Well, because they want to keep people there.
I
Yeah.
like the way you phrased it.
I'm doing my best, Steve.
Yeah.
I'm trying to make it a family member.
No, I saw a person when they were talking about certain recent polls that have come out almost by Pew Research, and then it was Barna.
Yeah.
The Pew Research poll was like how many people identify as Christian
Yeah.
in the nation,
Mhm.
and that it was 64%. And so Barna was looking at that and they're going, well, if it's 64%, you should see that reflected in the culture. He's like, but I don't think you do.
No.
So they designed a poll to ask questions,
Of the 64%.
yeah, to test worldview.
Right.
What do you think about this? And it wasn't like overly designed to be spiritual, but the overall idea was to take these questions and say, what does your worldview suggest you actually believe?
Right.
Mhm.
And they took that and they said about 6% of those folks have a Christian worldview. I'm thinking that probably is more
Yeah.
a more accurate reflection of what you see in culture today.
Agreed.
And that's huge because that's indicative of how well what we read in scripture we are acting out in our lives and
Mhm.
culture.
And,
And
and,
we're doing a bad job.
and you're going to see that, and I didn't know that it was going to dovetail this way. When we get into this first question, we're actually leading right up to the welcome mat for that. And I appreciate, Steve, that that you do that work so that because what happens is inadvertently I don't send you the stuff that we do, but I'll say this stuff because of the research and the regular work that you do. Steve's able to confirm that I'm not just pulling this out of left field, because it's true that and listen, this is a frightening thing if you think about it. 64% of Americans identify as Christian, right? We've got Mr. Trans vaccinated guy there. Right? And they identify as Christian, and 6% have a Christian worldview. That should make you very, very uncomfortable. It tells you that most people in the United States believe that we've couched as a right to choose. Right? Because that's a right to choose is a good thing, right? Choice, freedom is a good thing. What we've done with that is we've made that so the choice though on the table is not to engage in intimacy before the Lord says that He appreciates it. So how come that choice isn't one? By the way, past generations, even if they didn't always do it, that was where the honorable stance was.
Yep.
We have completely, through the sexual revolution of the 60s, transformed that ideal.
You should bring up your Facebook post here.
Oh, yeah. So
Just what the guy said.
I kind of have to go back and look at it though. So it's a guy from high school, okay, and he posted. Let me find the right verse that he posted. Okay, it was from 5 days ago. He posted out of Mark, and he said, "What comes out of man that defiles a man For from within, out of the heart of men, proceed evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lewdness, and evil eye, blasphemy, pride, foolishness. All these things come from within and defile a man. From Mark 7:20-23, the New King James Version. There is a whole litany of a conversation here. And this one guy,
Yeah, just sum up his response.
I'm going to try to sum up his review. He said, basically, I will read just the first couple lines of what he posted. He said, no, and I don't know this guy, so I don't know anything about him. He said, no offense to you, but I honestly cannot believe that list is considered evil. This is why religion is losing its grasp on society, because that is an absolutely ludicrous list of things that are considered evil. Being prideful is evil. Lewdness, really? Fornication, really? That's evil? To covet someone? Seriously? God is the one who gave us men the craving for women, so how could this even be a thing when he's the one who caused it to begin with? This is the start of a whole long conversation. I mean, a bunch of pieces out here.
Yeah.
And it's just very interesting because this guy's got it completely wrong. And Mike's trying to help him, other people are trying to help him too. But the sheer fact that he even posted this, I mean, at least he's asking the questions, right? He's just completely off. But this almost sums up where 94%
Yes.
of society is.
Yes.
And the 6% who are kind of going, you're crazy. We have now become the minority as opposed to even the moral majority.
Correct.
So believing in that those things are wrong are a position that you should feel shame for.
Right. Right. Fornication was becoming ancient when I was a kid, but at least our church taught about it. While though young ladies began to bring little kids to church, that was their own. Yes, sir.
The thing that struck me about what she just read and what he wrote, it sounded very much like a dude I read about named Adam, where he gets caught, excuse the expression, literally with his pants down. And God says, what have you done? And he goes, well, the woman you gave me. So he puts the blame back on God, just like he does. The woman you gave me, she's the one that fed me this pie. You know, it's all your fault because you gave her to me. And so men have been blaming women ever since, I guess, and in one way or another. And how many times have you heard, you know, the preacher say, you need not to be dressing in such a way, blah, 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 in order to make a man's, you know, mind and eyes straight. You need to be, we keep on blaming God for what he's created.
And a post further down, this guy brings up free will.
Yep.
He says it's no longer free will. If God could have made us the way he wanted us. And I'm like, oh, dude, I don't know who you are. But I mean, Mike does come back with a couple things. He's like, I can't even begin to address everything you have right here. Let me start. And but he talks about he is blaming God for doing what he did, as opposed to thinking through why God did what he did.
And the good Presbyterian would say, just a proof that no matter how good the situation might be, man is still going to go the way he's going to go.
This is significant enough, folks, in our neighborhoods, in our schools, in our communities, in our world, in our churches, that opportunities to push back on this. I would encourage you to look for those, because there are people that, you know, you may be attending worship with. There are people. This is partly why you had that grand assignment at the beginning of the year, is to ask your family members if they're believers, because number one, you might find out that they identify as believers because 94% of Americans do. But then the further discussion, this is kind of where Sherry went, is you may discover that those folks are believers. They're rhinos. They're believers in name only. They've been in church. They've been in the Bible Belt. They come from a Christian family. But when you ask them how their lives reflect their Jesus leadership, you're going to find out not so much, maybe. That's why you have to have the discussion. Yes,
What
sir.
does that have to do with being a what? Sorry?
Republican in name only.
They're
Got you.
believers in him.
Yeah, so they're a CMO almost. It's like a Christian in name.
Or binos.
Binos, yeah. I didn't necessarily like that word,
Yeah, I know.
so I went with the other one.
Sinos.
Yeah,
Sure.
with the other one because I was like, because I almost had Chino, but I was like, no, that's not right.
That we wait for Jane to come
No,
up.
but I was like, I thought, no, I'm not going to say that because that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had not heard that expression. I
Well,
don't know.
look, there you go.
Thank
Always
you.
good to be learning something new. And so, folks, that's why it's incumbent on you to have discussions with probably people that you have relationships with for a lot of years, because you may discover that people going to church with you have radically different ideas than what are in the Bible. And I would tell you, a lot of us, I told you the story about me facilitating a Bible study with young ladies. And I told you that on purpose because their worldview, even though they're Christians, they identify with Christians, they come from a Christian household, their worldview is it is perfectly fine not only to date someone with physical intimacy that escalates, so to cohabitate with them to make sure that you're finding the right compatible choice. That's what our culture has in many ways suggested is the okay route. And that's why Americans, Westerners in many ways, can't ever conceive of the idea of an arranged marriage. And as I told you before, probably over the past 5 or so years, as I've gotten older, I understand perfectly why you would do that. And certainly a young man, my own self, let my parents make any choice for me because they were going to choose weird. But just like the old show, and I'm sorry we lost Gene for the moment. Sometimes father and parents know best. But we're not going to give them that kind of credit when we're probably between 20 and 28. It's not until we have our own kids.
16 and 28.
I wasn't trying to go back that far.
I
Sure,
would.
sure. 28, when we start to maybe have our own families, especially our own kids, all of a sudden, your parents get to be giants of wisdom.
You even come back and go,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Because wow.
Correct.
I've done that with my mother.
So I'll give you that. Between 16 and 28, parents are idiots and your enemies. 28, though,
They become wow.
yeah. And the other thing happens, because one of the other things that happens at 28 makes you start to begin to at least think about them being wise. Free babysitter. Right? And then some of that stuff that's kind of culturally the exchange that happens begins to make you appreciate your parents better and then realize, oh, there wasn't a manual for the stuff I did. How did you manage me? Right.
One of the other things that happens is, and maybe I missed it while I was out, is the reason we can't in our day and age buy into an arranged marriage is because we are being bombarded as teenagers in our society and in school to basically come to odds with the way our parents think and reason. And because that's the case, we don't trust their judgment to arrange a marriage that would be workable. I think of Tevye, where he was part of an arranged marriage, and he has to ask his wife after however many years, do you even love me? I mean, I've gotten used to you, it's okay. But she's finally comes down to it that she has grown to love him. The arranged marriage in our day and age just won't fly because kids are basically being groomed, excuse the term, to distrust their parents and consequently not be
Told in schools now that you can be what you want to be.
Right.
We'll keep it a secret from your parents.
Sure. And love wins. So love who? And I would almost say, because we liked the song when it was out, right? Love the one you're with.
Yeah.
love and rabbit.
But what that's also turned into is kind of love how and where.
Or love what you're with.
Correct. Right? I mean, it's morphed. Because Love the One You Were With was about as risque a song as you could kind of adopt when we were kids. Now, woo. So I would hope that as you see our next question, that you recognize you guys have helped us to to usher this in. And maybe it'll be a tough turning point for you because you can't see the relationship or any relationship at all between the two words. But I will tell you that we're on the welcome mat of where this question helps us to pivot. And that question I think is posed, is it not? Is it on the big screen?
Should be.
What's it read? What's it say?
How do you think disagreement relates to disobedience?
How do you think disagreement, which is what we've been talking about over the past several weeks, how do you think disagreement relates to disobedience?
Does it depend on your point of view?
Yes, it does.
Because you could disagree with somebody because you've got proof to back up what you're saying, right?
Sometimes.
Sometimes. I'm just saying in a perfect world, if you have a conversation with somebody and you disagree with the point of view and you've got solid proof just to back up your reasoning.
Yep.
I don't say
That's
that.
not necessarily disobedience. But to me, if you disagree, and I don't know how to say it, but disagree wrongly, because you're looking out for yourself. That's not
Yes.
just we're disobedient. And
Yes.
I'm saying that right, but if it's because it's the way I feel, to me, that's more disobedience and disagreement together.
But didn't disagreement start that?
Disagreements, yes, yes. Okay.
Yeah. This leads us to,
How to say what I want to say.
this is the I know but.
She's working through it.
Well, I'll work through it.
This is the I know but.
Yeah.
You've given me all of these facts, all of this proof, all of this, argument for your stance, but I don't care. I want to do what I want to do.
Yes. And so, yes.
But so that's fine. So this disagreement, so if you would be the one that says, I feel this way, that's disobedience. But I mean, you have the conversation. And sometimes you got to start there.
But remember, you said you want to have the discussion.
Yes.
But we also discovered with the last question that sometimes we want to have the discussion, but sometimes we don't have the discussion. We just avoid it.
And that's a true statement. And that is probably disobedience. I'm gonna take my car keep them up later. How's that?
I think that one of the things that I'm hearing from Sarah that's got me a little confused, and it doesn't take much these days,
It's all me. It's all me.
is I see disagreement as being a mental state, whereas disobedience is an actual action. And so she's defining disobedience as something else that can be a mental thing, and I don't see it as that. Disobedience was when Adam ate the fruit. He'd been told, he disagreed, he thought it was okay, he got persuaded by a hot wife, and they had pie. It went from a disagreement to a disobedience.
All right. I don't know. See, I struggle with that example, Gene, and here's partly why. I don't think that Adam ever disagreed with God. I don't think Adam ever disagreed with God. I think Eve disagreed with God. Adam went along to go along. So I don't think Adam, and look, you get to ask him if you get to head out into eternity when and the line is not so long, and after the first 10,000 years, you get to ask the question. It's on everybody's mind, dude. Why'd you do
One rule, one thing to do.
But I believe that with the time he spent before the clock started with Yahweh God, there's nothing that indicates that he disagreed with Yahweh. What it looks like is he agreed with what his wife was asking him to do.
Well, wait a minute now.
Yes, sir.
Agreement with her is going to be disagreement with her.
The action that he goes about is not the disagreement, though, that we've discussed.
But he's still disobeying.
Yes, but his disobeying is not because he disagrees with God.
Now, let's turn it the other way around.
Yes.
Okay? If he agrees with God, doesn't that mean that he's going to say, no, that's a bad idea, Eve. We're going to have something else instead of pie?
No, not all the time. Because disobedience is not always physical.
So, okay.
Right. And that was the point you were making earlier, is that disobedience is regularly physically, and it is a lot physical, but sometimes it's here.
Okay.
It's here.
Okay, I'm a little slow. I don't see how a mental state or a thought can be, unless somebody says, don't think that way.
Uh-huh.
I don't see how that can be disobedience.
Okay.
I think it could lead to an action, but it starts here. It's like it starts here and then you act on it.
Unless you're a teenager.
If you hate your brother,
Yeah.
then you've committed murder in your heart.
Correct. If you, right.
Speak. I don't want to interrupt anybody. Interrupt. So we do.
So, a long time ago, when I used to teach a class on abuse, I used to teach about the difference between philosophy and attitude. Okay? So, if you guys are going to dime store definition, what's the difference? What's philosophy? What's attitude?
I'm trying to think right now because I'm trying to figure out the difference at the moment.
That's philosophy.
Okay, thank you.
Philosophy is what's up here.
And attitude is how you act.
That's how we know your philosophy.
Okay, thank you.
We know your philosophy by how you act.
Okay,
Okay? Philosophy is up here. Attitude is there.
comes out.
Is what comes out. Right. Now, you can have a skewed philosophy. For instance, you can, let me give you a silly one so you can recognize this, because we're not so much just talking about Yahweh God. You can be a racist and I might never know it.
You don't ever act on that.
That's
At least not act publicly.
That's right.
Okay.
You might be a racist, but I would never know it. You might be a misogynist, but I might never know it. If you never act out on it. Now, because you think that way, is that right or is it not? Let me ask you a different question. Let's go Sunday school here a little bit. Is that God honoring or not God honoring? That's how I process information.
That sounds not God honoring.
Right. So I can be disobedient here if you never see it played out.
Okay.
Part of that is kind of what Michaela's wants to say but won't. So if we go Sunday school completely on this, God looks on the,
Yep.
not on the,
Action.
and that's why Samuel didn't want to anoint David.
Is that why Jeremiah 17:9 comes in? Where you are
Who can know it?
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Okay.
If we go Sunday school,
Yeah.
right? I'm trying to keep us in the realm before we get to Sunday school, though, so that you can understand. You can disagree here. That can become disobedience here, even if it never gets acted out. And no, it's an odd concept. And you can speak out for those. Yes, sir.
I took something a little different out of this. When I think about me being disobedient, I'm thinking about people that are over me, a God that's over me, or anything. If I'm in disagreement with them, I can't blindly follow them willingly
Or well.
or well.
Right. Correct.
So that's the way I took it. I've got to be in agreement with my Savior. We're going to be on the same page
Okay.
if I'm going to follow Him.
Okay.
I look at my employees when I got a better idea.
Yep.
This is why we have to do it like it. Yes, that would work in another instance, but not here.
Yeah.
This is why.
Yeah. And I like that. I like that, Derek, because if we move that away from Sunday school, and I'm going to give you, because now we're talking about, I'm going to give you a silly, maybe a funny example of disagreement that turns into disobedience that's obvious. But Jerry's right on this. Sometimes when you disagree and you want to disobey, what you do is you look for opportunities to do things your way as opposed to the way that they're done.
Yeah, and this is, as I read these questions, it was like that. I'm thinking of employment.
Uh-huh.
I'm thinking of the boss says, do this. I don't think it's a great idea. I think it's going to cause problems.
Yep.
I think it's too much work.
Yep.
Whatever the reason is, I disagree with it.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I'm going to look for a way to try to sneak in my methodology and see if, I can get it done without agreeing and obeying.
Yeah, and without maybe getting caught, and it may take several years
Mhm.
before I get an opportunity to implement what I think is a better way. So let me give you silly. So we can move away from the realm of church, Sunday school. So my parents lived through the Great Depression. And my parents, because of their culture, had a very strong way of looking at good and bad. There was very little gray with my parents, black or white. And they were people that saw black and white, even to the degree of clothing. So, for instance, when I was a kid, I could never wear these. So I got old enough to buy my own clothes, and then I could. I didn't get to wear these obediently in my household until I was in 11th grade, because I had a job and then I could buy them. Because these, by my parents, were considered poverty clothes.
Glad they're not meaning pants in general.
I was younger and I was rocking it back then. Thank you.
Jeans.
So we got Preston in the kilt.
Better than no pants.
A lot younger than, again, I'm gonna argue for myself there, but I appreciate what you're. Yes, jeans. Thank you. Didn't mean to distract you. Jeans. So I couldn't wear jeans, but I also couldn't wear sneakers.
Huh?
Couldn't wear jeans and sneakers to school.
Where's loafers?
My parents thought both of those were signs of poverty. Now, appreciate the looks on your face. Again, my parents were older than some of your parents. So, having lived through the times that they did and being Southerners, these are sharecropper pants. These are what you work when you work the fields. You work tobacco and cotton. And then the way that we wear them today, with patches and holes, there was no way that my parents were okay with that at all.
Now you bought them like that.
Right. My parents absolutely detested that. So that wasn't the vogue when I was in school. Folks were kind of maybe having, if they had holes, they would have patches ironed in them. Kind of that. Thank you. See some of you old people saying that. So the patches would kind of be there because that was kind of what the style was. You could have a hole, but you needed to have a patch kind of with it. And so I couldn't wear sneakers because sneakers were considered poor people's shoes as well. So my parents had me wearing like double knits and shoes that were kind of office shoes.
Penny loafers. With the
Oh no. My parents weren't penny loafers.
Okay.
What did you
Yes, like Oxfords.
What
play basketball in?
Yeah, really.
So it was okay to switch into my gym clothes at gym, but for gym only. But not to go to school that way, because wearing this and wearing those sneakers, which are not these, would be shameful for my family, for me to go out that way. So
Where did you live at this point?
I'm not going to live. So some of you know I lived in,
Did you bring a change of clothes with you to school?
almost.
I've done that before.
Almost.
Done that before.
So I lived in probably what used to be one of the most affluent, snooty communities in probably the United States. And after a while, I started realizing people weren't wearing the same thing that my parents thought I should wear. So I procured the clothing that would work, and I hid it outside of the house. And what I would do is I would leave the house wearing the clothes that my parents thought was okay. And when I thought they weren't available for looking, I would change into the clothes that they didn't want me to wear. And then when I got off the bus, I'd have to strategically now, because my mom sometimes would look out the window to see me come back from the bus. I would have to have the clothes on when she saw me kind of passing and then getting in the house. So that worked for a short while. And I say that to you because that's an example of disagreement. My parents were wrong about this. My parents were wrong because of what fashion is, right? Fashion is not biblical principle. Fashion is kind of the thing that allows people to kind of embrace other folks, and you fit in with what the fashion is. I was trying to explain it to my parents. They didn't want to have that discussion. They knew best. Empirically, you don't know what you're talking about. You're a kid, you're going to do what we said. And in my head, I'm going, not in my head, but in my...
You were hearing womp womp, womp womp.
So in my head, I'm going, when I get the chance, I'm going to figure this bad boy out.
Yeah.
So I figured it out. And ultimately to my detriment, because they found out, and then she told my dad, and then that wasn't good. So then I had to wait until I had the funds to be able to support being able to purchase clothes that would better blend in. And so we can have some fun about that if we go off grid to help you recognize that really was a reality. But that's to wade into the discussion to talk about how disagreement can sometimes become disobedience, and it doesn't have to happen in the church arena. It happens where you disagree so strongly, you go, when I get the chance, I got a better idea. Happens here. And like Steve said, it happens here. And that's where that mark statement comes out. It's not what goes in a man that defiles him, it's what comes out. And that's where Jeremiah comes from. The heart is decidedly wicked. Who can know it? And that's why Jeremiah, the Lord talks about taking the heart of stone and replacing it with flesh. Right? There you go. It's one Bible verse. It's in this book. So the question here reads, and maybe now Sarah has gotten her handle on some of the thinking, is how do you think disagreement relates to disobedience?
It's also like disagreement leads to disobedience.
I just gave you a silly example of exactly
It just
that.
leads to it. It's almost like I'm picturing you with the good angel and the bad angel. So you're talking, and so like the other night when you were here with me, you were going, "Here goes the good angel," and I'm sticking with this guy. So I mean, because sometimes you can be in disagreement, right? But you don't act on it because you work it through and you go, "Okay, I see the reasoning behind this,"
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's when you don't work through it or you totally go against it,
Yeah.
that's when it leads to disobedience.
Yep. You don't necessarily agree and like the consequences of your agreement. So you look for opportunities to make a change. What else you got? Other stuff?
Since you asked it that way.
Yes, sir.
Regarding genes. As a teacher at the academy back in the dark ages, one of the policies was we were not allowed as teachers to wear jeans.
Yep, good.
Okay. Representation and all that kind of thing. However, evidently what they meant to say was you are not allowed to wear denim. Because I had some very nice dress denim slacks, and I got called out for it because you're not supposed to wear jeans. These are not jeans; they're just happen to be made of the same fabric. So talk about hair splitting and legalism.
Yeah.
Anyway, I went round and round and round and round and round with the pastor on that because. I mean, the construction of blue jeans is very, very different from
Chinos or khakis.
yeah,
Yep.
pleated front
Yep.
slacks.
Right.
And so there are some people with their legalistic mentality that will split that hair mighty fine.
You're correct. Well, remember, we used to have we didn't call jeans. Jeans weren't, until Levi's and 501 or 505, 504s, until they came out. Certainly the 50s and 60s kind of made them popular, but you remember we used to call them before jeans, right? Dungarees. And dungarees were work pants. And they were the work pants that were created because what you could do with them is you could work in the factories, work in the mines, you could wash them, hang them up to dry. And now my wife watches, I'm not going to tell you this. And with dungarees, you can put them on wet and they will dry. Thank you, sir. You can put your dungarees on wet and they will dry.
Most uncomfortable.
Well, for a bit, but if you have to go to work and work in the mines and the clothes need to be washed and you have 2 or 1 pair of pants, you need good work. That's what these do when they're made well.
Well, like I said, construction is so very different though. And I tried to go into, there aren't any rivets on this, there's no watch pocket on this, none of that. And it's like, no, they're dungarees. I think you even use that term because they're denim. Anyway.
All right, so let me read this to you. I think Nate's going to push a button, and then maybe this will also inspire some of your collection of thinking and organization of thought, if that's what you indeed need. So disobedience suggests that I should be obedient to someone or something. Disobedience suggests that I should be obedient to someone or something. Already, you should be a little upset as Americans, and I'm telling you that
Why
because
should we have to do that?
that's correct. Free will,
Mhm.
right? You just talked about that guy posting.
Mhm.
This offends my sense of independence that we discussed earlier. I don't think the word should be related unless I am a child imprisoned or compromised.
And it's not an imprisoned child, there's a comma there.
Correct.
I just wanted to put that there because the way you read it, I'm like, no, there's a comma.
I got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just making sure, because, the child in prison, yeah, well, okay.
Now, this is all fluid thinking. That last thought is kind of by itself to say, ultimately, I'm so offended by the point that you would suggest these two are related that I don't think the word should be related unless I'm a child, unless I'm imprisoned, or unless I'm compromised.
Yeah, and the whole overarching thing is I'm being controlled by somebody else, and I don't want to be controlled.
And I disagree.
Yeah, exactly. Because,
It's my life.
Right.
And this just
Did I say that out loud?
You did.
just keeps it just comes to mind a verse that I like a lot and also dislike it a lot. It's why do you say to me, Lord, Lord, if you do not do what I say?
I love when you brought that up for us to tackle the first time because it's just the simplest way of Jesus taking to task people that say, we're Christians, we're little Christ. And the question is, then if you are, how come you won't do what I told you to do? And see, that's when we talk about fueling that discussion, finding your Jesus interaction encounter during the course of the week. This is where the whole of everything hinges on this. So if 94%, if 64% of Americans say they're Christians, so then the question gets to be, why don't you do what he commands? Why don't you think the way that Jesus asks us to think? In part, it has to do with probably at its core, if you're honest, you disagree with some of Jesus's junk.
Well, because it goes against what I want to do.
It
yeah, it's
sure,
countercultural too.
it sure does.
It goes against what I want to go do.
It's too much work.
Oh,
We're Americans. We're hard workers. What do you mean by that, Michaela? We work hard. We don't shy away from work.
I'm sorry. She's right.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because some time on mentality and please let me have some more. And I'd rather not do the work that requires. And particularly these days, we saw it played out during the pandemic. If I can get a check without having to go work, I'm cool with that. Is what the mentality was pervasive again.
Money for nothing.
What's that?
Money for nothing.
Money for nothing. That's right.
Search for free.
And gentlemen, I'm entitled to it because I'm American.
So I'm messing with Michaela a little bit, even though she's absolutely right. Is that it's too hard. We don't want to work for it. We met up with a really good friend who's unfortunately having a struggle with a business. Part of the struggle with the business is the pandemic and the mentality that folks, this country's growing, and I don't want to do the politics thing, but please see the agenda that is at play that is getting beautifully orchestrated. And it's happening on our watch. This is also part of the reason I'm looking to encourage us to just go before the water's above our head so that we can say, we've been talking the whole time because we let it happen and we're not turning the pot over or getting rid of the water or whatever it takes. We're going to be victims that can't make a complaint. Some friends who have a business have found that their business is struggling in part because of the machinations of the pandemic. And what it did is it took a business that typically had folks who do a kind of hard work that a lot of us in the room we appreciate, but we probably wouldn't do for ourselves. And what the pandemic did is it first it closed down the business, and then it sent people home because they couldn't really have contact ultimately because this is a contact kind of business. and then was giving them money. And then the money that it gave them allowed these folks to kind of re-educate themselves. So now potentially they don't have to go back and work a business that's as hard, and they can work at home and not do this business that was a kind of thriving one before the pandemic. And now this kind of business is struggling to keep personnel there because personnel don't want to do the hard work that it takes to keep the job the same way before. So a silly example, and I'll kind of make this a corollary. Some of you know what Nextdoor is in your neighborhoods and your communities. So one of the things I read about a lot in one of the postings from Nextdoor is nail salons. Nail salons are having a really, really tough time keeping personnel because the person who does the nails has to go into the salon. They have to have interactions with people. And the pandemic has taught a lot of folks people are bad to interact with because they may have COVID, they may have disease. And they have to go into a place and they have to sometimes, if not, and I'm using nails, but there are other businesses like this, they have to be on their feet 8 or more hours a day. So what they've done is they've taken the money that they got through the pandemic and they've re-educated themselves to do things like medical record, medical coding. So now they can work at home and not be in a salon where they have to go to a place, use gas, and be doing a kind of labor that in some ways supports our culture and our community.
I think there's another area that's been affected by this, and we kind of saw this last night. Went to a restaurant, and the lady who greeted us was not the sharpest knife in the drawer. I wasn't sure what she was doing, but it appeared to me that she was actually, even though there were plenty of tables, she was waiting to seat people because while there were places to sit, she didn't necessarily have the staff to serve. And I think that's one of the issues that a lot of restaurants are running into. Yeah, and go to a restaurant that doesn't say we're hiring. Try to find one of those because this is an area where folks do not want to work.
Correct.
I would be delighted to work in that, but I can't because I can't do the job. I got fired from that. But they just can't seem to keep people working who are ready to just stay at home instead of waiting tables or washing dishes or cooking. They'd rather sit at home and money for nothing.
So-
Get through several times and had signs up saying closed early due to staffing.
Right.
Sure.
Well, it's not just jobs or anything. We recently found out we had a little neighborhood group that we went out and did stuff with occasionally, not often, but several times a year. And we found out through all this that we've been kind of ostracized because we didn't have a shot.
Mm-hmm.
So
Identify as fashion.
the invitations don't come and all. And it's fine. It happens everywhere, all stages of life.
This exchange was to help illuminate that Michaela's point about us not wanting to do the work is a very sincere one.
Mm-hmm.
And Steve's point that maybe you didn't hear so much is it's generational.
Yeah.
Because the greatest generation, and I'm not going to say the baby boomers have not done a great job. They started off in a war. Baby boomers were post-World War kind of too. But the greatest generation were the guys that fought World War II. They did whatever it took. They did whatever it took to support the Constitution, freedom. When we think about veterans and Memorial Day, certainly we can harken back to the Civil War and the Revolutionary War. But a lot of the modern heroes certainly are from the Korean War, certainly World War II. And I will always endorse, if you struggle with that, please see the beginning of
Saving Private Ryan.
Saving Private Ryan. Yeah, especially with June 6th just having passed. We struggle with being folks relied on to do work. And this concept of I should be beholden to someone else's ideal, especially if we're lazy, that doesn't work for us. So, Gene, I understand when, because we were at a church where this happened, where the pastor or the deacons call out some lady for dressing in a way that supposedly promotes her her physical attributes. And when I say appreciate that, I'm saying that kind of lightly because here's the deal. If we men are thinking about, especially in a church situation, we're thinking about the precepts that Steve reminded us is honor the things that Jesus said, if you're a believer. But here's the thing, you should be able to wear nothing. And I'm perfectly okay with that. Now listen, that doesn't mean that to be a pun, to use a pun, that I'm not titillated by the situation, right? But there's a degree to where I'm going to go in my mind to go, that's something I'd like to be able to take advantage of. And does that work? Yeah, it does. And look, I'll almost shoot this for you in a weird way if that makes a difference. When a lot of us in this room either dated or became engaged to our spouses, there was certainly hotness factor going on. There's a lot of hotness, especially on the guy's perspective. Guys like hot. But after a certain period of time, the hotness also becomes a better connectivity, a better sense of commitment, which, by the way, the Bible says is supposed to be there first before the hot, right? To the point then where you can, this doesn't work all the time, okay? You can present Raquel Welch. You can present Beyonce. You can present Michelle Pfeiffer. And that's a really, really neat, cool thing, except my spouse is better. That's a nice thing. Disagree? You guys get to speak out. I'm talking craziness because, guys, our news is always rampant with adultery. Always rampant with the latest star they're no longer in love. Right? So I'm talking crazy talk. So thoughts about that? Because we're talking about how disagreement and disobedience kind of are related. And Michaela said, part of the reason that disobedience happens is because we don't want to put the work in. I just gave you an example where that's where I think we don't want to put the work in. We're really lazy when it comes to physical intimacy.
Oh, I hear what you're saying, and I think the reason I can say my wife's better is because I have a greater connection to her.
Okay.
I don't know Raquel Welch. I don't know Michelle Pfeiffer. Beyonce. They haven't visited in ages. So I don't
Good
have
address, that's the problem.
Yeah, I need to get that too. So no, I don't have that kind of connection, but I can talk to my wife, and we have a connection. We over coming up on 36 years, and I think there's a work to that. There have been times when she wanted to boot me out, and vice versa. But we're still here because we have a different kind of connection than just the visual and physical.
What is the connection?
Oh, it's a mental.
Okay.
It's a heart connection.
Okay.
We can reason together. It's not just the picture.
Okay.
I mean, I think about this dude. I think we had an article on Slack about this. This guy married a virtual. I'm like, well, so let me just marry this poster of Lighthouse. Why not? It's like marry a picture. What's the difference between marrying a picture and marrying a virtual person with that he probably created in the first place?
You have just insulted the whole community there, man.
That's okay. You know what? I identify as vaccinated.
That wasn't Japan.
What's that?
That wasn't Japan. It was a whole other one.
Well, yeah. The difference, because it takes work, is we have this different kind of connection that I don't have with anybody else. So.
Gene, when you explain it like that, I get very excited because it's the thing that Steve made reference to. It's this and it's this. And so it means if, whatever I think of as the bastion of hotness were to come in a situation, in a church situation or a nightclub situation or a school situation, that these two things are so well in alignment that I go, that's nice. How you doing? Good to see you. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's more than I said.
Sure, and lingering a little bit more, but it's not something that's going to make me go, I need to change my stripes. I need to change my way of thinking. I need to change my behavior because what I'm doing right now constitutes so much work that I'd rather just mail it in.
I'd like to share something here that I cannot recall whether or not I was in the presence of it occurring or whether I just heard it from the preacher. But there was a preacher one time who was a guest speaker.
Yeah.
Okay. He goes into the church and there's a woman sitting on the front row back in the days of miniskirts that had a miniskirt that was way up there.
Sure.
And he actually told her, would you please move back at least a row? And he said this out loud in the group, I cannot preach looking up your dress.
Yeah.
You know, and so this is the kind of thing, I mean, he probably could have. It would have been work, but it would also, for him, been distracting.
So there's probably a better way for him to have done it.
Well, perhaps so, but I understand that that's what happened.
So when you experience that kind of thing, you're seeing the button that can get pushed for that particular individual, right? Because the better way to have done that, see, now right now, that poor lady is going to struggle if she was going to worship in that environment.
Absolutely.
And that's a lady who should take her toys and run, because what she's just learned is that there's no sense in some ways of interpersonal discretion to be able to say that may not work. And the best way to have done that would have been to find a lady, to do that off, to take the time you need, have the choir do a song, have a lady be able to go and address that lady and make some suggestions if that's really the distraction point that you're at. But listen, there's some other suggestions there too. Here's the one: get the heck off the pulpit. And preach so you don't need to be doing that and looking right at the lady. See David and Bathsheba. Change your position. See, and so sometimes we're so used to we don't want to do the work. We're so used to doing things a certain way. That's the only way I knew to do it. And if that lady was there, potentially that lady maybe needed to hear what needed to be said. Change the position from which you did deliver the message. So a whole lot of different ways to skin that cat.
Right. And I agree. I'm just saying that this happens and has happened.
It does. How we respond to it, though, in some ways suggests that we've got a weakness of mind.
I agree.
I'm saying some radical stuff here because we've certainly been with that. I was in a group of folks and the deacons came and gave a lecture series to one of the ladies in our group. And I said, guys, you're doing this the wrong way. This lady's coming from a situation where she hated her body. And right now she feels pretty good about her body. And that's the stuff she's putting on her body to express that. You're barking on the wrong tree right.
Yeah. And we had this instruction a bazillion years ago. Private sins are confessed privately, public sins are confessed publicly. And what ends up happening, and I actually saw this on a TV show the other day, they're in a meeting and the leader of the meeting calls out somebody for a disagreement. And then goes back and says, I was wrong to call you out in that meeting, but they do it privately. They don't
Do it the same way.
Yeah, they don't do it the same way.
Right.
There's a philosophy there, if that's the right word. I don't know anymore. But there's a sense that we have to do things in equitability. You know, and you're right. Calling her from the pulpit saying you need to move. She probably moved right on out the door, like you said. Sure, because now she's embarrassed and the red doesn't go with red in her skirt, and so she's gone.
Sure.
So yeah, we need to be more sensitive and more. There's another word I want to use, but we need more discerning. We need to be more discerning in how we deal with people in order to continually open the door for the gospel.
Correct. And you mentioned it earlier. You talked about legalism. Legalism is sometimes a lot of work, but it's lazy man's work. It's where we fall back on kind of principles without really thinking through the spirit of versus the letter of, right? And I tell you these stories sometimes that come about because they really are happenings, and I didn't intend to tell you, but they seem to flow in the work of the moment. And Ellen, certainly Ellen and I, we've visited our share of legalistic congregations while we've been here in good old Richmond, and one of which we were part for some time. We had joined. There was a gentleman who Ellen and I befriended him a lot. A really, really sweet man, and he struggled at times during the church service to need to go outside and smoke.
Mhm.
And so he would go outside and smoke, and I would sometimes hang out with him, not say during the sermon, but after church, and I would do it hopefully comfortably away so I didn't smell like smoke. Well, I got taken to task on that by some of the church leaders, and my response to them was, "You don't understand the situation."
Mhm.
And what they were upset about was that the church member was smoking on the church grounds, and then by association, he was drawing me into that.
Mhm.
And I said, "Folks, the gentleman that I'm meeting, he used to be a heroin addict. He's in a step down program right now using methadone. And so to kind of balance the old habit that he has, he smokes."
Mhm.
I said, "I'm going to be in his orbit to encourage him smoking so he doesn't go back to heroin.
Sure.
So he doesn't go back to the need for methadone. So if that partnership helps to encourage him to stay off the hard stuff, folks, I'm going to have to do that." And ultimately, we had to leave those bunch of folks because one of the guys thought I was trying to take his wife. So we left. So we have stories. That's why we talk the way we talk. We have stuff that happened. And I like that Michaela says, we struggle with the point of asking us to be obedient because it's work we don't want to have to do.
Mhm. Too much trouble.
Okay.
It's easier to feed discipline sometimes.
It sure is, because it's my free will.
It's going with the flow, and to use your phrase, going along to get along.
Yes.
And who wants to really obviously look out of step with the rest of the culture?
Right.
Exactly.
Right. I don't want to be a square. I don't want, and remember, we laughed a few weeks ago about it's hip to be square. But Christians struggle with that right now.
Well,
Christian,
it's easier because you don't have to go do the research. So
Correct.
where Michaela's going. So I'm like, well, I'm just gonna just not say anything,
correct.
which is disobedient in and of itself, because I don't want to necessarily have to go here, right? Or even go look at what other people may say about it. And I'll look at that myself too. So
I would go so far as what you're saying, young lady, is if you're going along to get along and you just don't want to, yep, you don't love the people you claim to love.
That's
I
strong.
can see where you're coming from, because if you love them, you're gonna tell them, you're gonna show them. But that's hard to do.
It's the hard work.
It's the hard part.
That's part of your assignment, is to ask your family members the hard thing: do you know Jesus? Because if you love them,
Mhm.
that's what you would be doing. But what we love best is being comfortable.
Mhm.
And we talked about this in a lesson that we've done eons ago, which is part of the reason we don't ask our loved ones that question, is because I'm fearful of how it's going to make me feel if they don't want to be my friend or my relative, or they don't want to have conversation. I don't like the way it's going to make me feel. But then this goes back to this thing that the preacher said in church. This is why homosexuality and the transgender, the LGBT movement is more important than the greatest sin, which is not believing in Jesus, is because Jesus isn't here to punish people seemingly for not believing in him. And it doesn't offend me as much as my morality and all that other stuff, watching this group of people do the transgressions they transgress with. Why am I saying that? Because Jesus may not be there to soothe my feelings when my feelings get hurt, when I ask my brother if he's a believer, when I ask my son if he's a believer, and now my son doesn't want to talk to me for a week.
It happened to me 2 weeks ago, Kristen. He's like, I'm not husband.
You know, you just got up there.
Michaela says the
Sluts comments about the juxtaposition or the synergy between disagreement and disobedience.
I think that your last point on there is so key, because when we disagree and we have to abide by what we disagree with, we feel control, like a prisoner, like we're a child, like we're in some way compromised.
What was our lesson? Two Sunday school lessons.
Oh yeah, it's dependency and control are kind of together.
So we should be okay with this if we're bond servants.
True that.
But again, that's why we did that lesson. We are not comfortable being servants of anybody except the Most High.
Mm-hmm.
The Most High.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't believe that, my Facebook page will tell you that. If you don't believe that, my Instagram post will tell you I'm the Most High.
Yes, I can't get my head around this whole, what do they call it? Well, no, they, shoot, I can't even come up with a word. Anyway, Facebook, whether they're posting pictures of dinner, you know, or what drink they've had, or and it's like,
Because that should be as important to you as it is to me.
exactly.
It's part of
So-
being an influencer.
Yes,
What's that?
it's a new career.
There's,
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Just like
Making serious money on this.
They are.
which makes me so.
social media. That's the word I was trying to come up with. They call it social media. What's social about showing you the nice steak dinner? And why would you care? Why
You should.
Right.
I took the time to post it. You should care what I posted and you should give me a like for that.
Correct.
And that means what? Yeah.
It's
that-
revenue.
No, well,
Yeah.
people, yes.
Yeah.
But if, you know, if one of my friends posts, they're not influencers, they don't even say what they're eating half the time. So what's the point of that, you know?
Yeah. And so
They've been influenced by the influencers.
we,
And if you stop and think about it, they're all still worshiping that same triune God, me, myself, and I.
exactly. It's
Yes.
it is very self-centeredness, and I guess that's one of the reasons I still have an account so I can go and check on my son and daughter if I need to, but I don't actively pursue that. Same thing with LinkedIn. That, and I've never even thought about LinkedIn as being a social media, but it
is.
It is.
Yeah. I can tell you right now, if you get a new job or you apply for a new job, almost the first thing they do is they check your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah.
And LinkedIn is the place. Look, if you don't do TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn is where you get the flats.
Yep.
We'll talk about resume. That's where you get to say how great I am.
Yeah. So anyway, but I just don't. I guess I haven't been influenced enough to be able to want to do that kind of thing or appreciate it.
Okay.
Which is me.
So, you know, you may not be linked into social media, but you're linked into commercials on TV. And they tell you that your life isn't good until you get.
Something.
Right. 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 And what, you know, unless you're doing completely paid streaming, you're getting advertisements that tell you you need something.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, we are victims of that. And our mentality is we are dependent sometimes on a regular ingestion of what else? What's the next thing? Jesus is not sufficient.
Mhm.
And folks, it's work. It's like Michaela said, it is a hard work thing to put yourself in position to say, you know, we talk about this a lot, and you'd think I get sick of saying this, but I when I get sick of saying it, I think about the Easter Sunday guy that Ellen and I met, which is this: you need to find opportunities to tell people that Jesus is better.
Mhm.
You need to find opportunities to tell people that Jesus is better, because you're doing it with. I can't tell you how many times this week somebody's told me Top Gun is an amazing movie. Some people I haven't even seen in a while reached out to me to tell me you need to see Top Gun.
You're speaking of the old one, not the new one.
No, the brand new one.
Okay.
It just came out last week. Dude, you need to go see. You need to go see that. There are some people in my circle that'll have to reach out to me and say, "Hey, the Doctor Strange movie, man, wasn't all that great, but you need to see it." Right? You need to see the Celtics Dub series that's going on right now, because that Game 4 that Curry just put up is a game for the ages.
If you say so.
Right. You need to. My point being, folks, is
Agreed.
whether it's the movies, whether it's sports, whether it's Kamala Harris doing, whether it's AOC, whether it's Joe Biden saying something interesting, all of those things are much more important to you than telling somebody Jesus is better. Because you told somebody during this week, I think Kamala Harris should be blown up. I think the words coming out of her mouth absolutely stupid. She talks to people like they're second graders, everybody, even Congress people. I see it, Steve. So if you're going to spend the time to tell somebody that, same time to go, Jesus is better. And then don't be afraid when they say, why did you just come up with that in the statement? Because he is. Hey, Nate, would you post the question for next week as we end today? And did you read it once it's posted, Zoom?
Okay. How do you define the word confess?
Okay. Is there a second part of that?
There might be, but it's on a different slide.
Oh, yeah, okay, don't worry.
Split it out.
Don't worry about that for now.
Yeah.
How do
You
you,
can pull up the other side, Nathan, if you want.
that's right.
Okay.
How do you define the word confess?
And I'm gonna tell you ahead of time, next week, I'm gonna have to probably abstain from this discussion. Because my definition of the word changed once I got educated about the word.
Oh, no, you get to weigh in, but try to keep a breach in your conversation of before and after.
So with the second part is how does this confession,
Yeah.
define the word confession,
Yeah.
relate to Yahweh and Jesus?
Yeah.
So there's the second part. So you got it. We split it up onto two slides though.
So, but yeah, and because of my understanding of the word behind the word, it relates strongly to the.
Okay. So let me give you an encouragement. Number one, go find your Jesus encounters this week, because that's what's important. By the way, people were telling you that you were earning crypto every time you'd reference a friend, you go out and do it. So you are kind of getting crypto, but it's going to be crypto. You just don't get. It's kind of like Ethereum. You don't really get to see it. You don't get to touch it, but it is. That's what telling people about Jesus is, like cryptocurrency. Please define the word if you've not yet done it. But better than that, come in with your feelings about the word. That's going to make for the better and more lively discussion. Come in with the definition, but come with your feelings about the word. Bring it. I hear you. Other stuff before we close out. Okay. Thank you for indulging. Part of the fun, if it may not sound like it is between the time when we gather and the campaigns are happening, there's a lot of week, there's a lot of world that happens, and some of that stuff is very impactful, and it makes its way kind of into our morning discussion. And darkness covered the land.
Well, Diane lost power.
Yeah. Is that why she went away?
That's why she went away, because she lost power. She sent me in there.
This is what it was like in Egypt, except the ocean.
Well, it's dark. It's like it's nighttime out here.
Electricity. Really, no electricity, no Rappahannock Electric, no Dominion.
I have like 20 things, weather.
I do too. I've got live weather alerts going on everything too.
But it usually will buzz.
Yeah, it was something really bad. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Let's pray. We're not going to pray for electricity because we ain't worried that way. Lord, you are sovereign over all of this, Lord. You own it. You made it. You created it. And so, Lord, help us to have a healthy respect for the fact that, Lord, you operate in a way that we sometimes don't understand. And to help us to be glad in it, Lord, the fact that you are the creator, you are above all, and that we are not, Lord. And help us to be pleased, help us to be proud, help us to be your peculiar portable people, and pleased with the fact that, Lord, we've been adopted into your family because of the death and the murder of the Lord Jesus. And so, Lord, help us during the course of the week to put the priority where it needs to be, to put you first in a way, Lord, that puts our attitude where our philosophy is supposed to be. Help us to say what it is, Lord, that we think, and to do it with such a vibrancy and an electricity and an enthusiasm that the same way, Lord, that a 2% into a 5% can then begin to transmute the community as a whole. Help us to be able to push back person by letting people know that you are Lord, you are sovereign still, even in these times. Let's Brother Gene as he comes, allow the rest of our time, Lord, to just be checkpoints in a positive way so that we can go out and do battle during the course of the week. Amen.